When I hear people say they're waiting, it usually sounds like I need more time, or I'm not ready yet, or I can't. I can't yet. And on the surface, that sounds responsible, but a lot of the time, waiting isn't wisdom. It's the fear of wearing a better outfit. I've done this myself. My senior year of high school, I kept waiting to commit to a college. Not because I didn't have options, but honestly because I had too many options. I told myself I was being smart. I didn't want to miss the best opportunity, so I kept searching and searching and searching. And it was great. I ended up with over 30 scholarship offers to play soccer around the country. And out of all those offers, I still couldn't decide, and I still couldn't make that decision. And the truth is, from the very beginning, I knew which school felt the best. And from that very first phone call with that coach, I knew that it felt right. And then even after I went and visited them, it kind of reassured it. But I still couldn't make a decision because I was so worried about making the wrong decision and picking the wrong place and having the wrong opportunities. And it really did. It just delayed that same choice that I would have made from the very beginning. And honestly, I think I was so afraid of making the wrong decision that I wouldn't allow myself to feel the joy and excitement of making the right decision even when I did pick, because I was so worried about what was going to happen. And I think here's what people get caught in, and the lie that they tell themselves a lot. It's that if we think if we just wait long enough, we'll finally get the perfect sign. We'll have more clarity, we'll have more confidence, and we'll have more certainty. But what if the thing you were waiting for was gone in 7 minutes? Would that change the way you went about making a decision? Waiting feels like the mature thing to do. When we're kids, we don't think before we act, and we just move. As adults, we're taught that maturity means slowing down, thinking more, being more careful, waiting until it feels safe, and it feels protective. But there's a reason that kids learn and grow so much faster than we do. They don't wait for permission. They don't wait until they feel ready. They act and then they adjust. If they get hurt, they adjust. If it worked out, they adjust. If they try something and it didn't work, they learn and they adjust and they try again. I don't know how many times I've been around kids and they try to do the same thing 10 different ways, and finally on the 11th try, it works, and they just go about it like it's normal. How many times do us as adults or young adults try something once and it doesn't work, and maybe try it twice and it doesn't work, and then we just give up because we decide it's not for us? That's not how life works. That's not how it's going to work. We have to keep going and keep trying even when our first or second try doesn't work. So imagine if we took what would happen and if we took action like children again, not being reckless but being curious, and not being careless but being willing. Most of the time when someone says, "I'm just being patient," what they're really doing is just pushing off the decision until the moment that it feels perfect. Waiting gives us permission to avoid action without having to admit that we're scared. And the cost of waiting is way bigger than we think. It slowly chips away at our confidence. It makes you trust yourself less. You lose time, and eventually you lose faith in your own ability to move. A lack of action creates a lack of faith. Most people who feel stuck aren't unmotivated, they're just overthinking their first move. When we think about our heroes, we usually think about the highlights. We see the results. We see their confidence at the highest point. And we see the version of them that have made it to where they are today. But a lot of the times what we don't see and what we don't think about or realize is their backstory. How many people did they lose to get to where they were? How many times have they failed trying different things to get to where they are? How often have they felt alone and in their own, how many times have they been in their own head along the way? And how many times have they gotten hurt or completely beaten down, whether it's actually literally physically or mentally or emotionally? A lot of the times we want to be like our heroes, but we want the glory without going through the pain. We want the confidence without the doubt. And we want the victory without any defeat. We admire that glory, but forget the pain that built it. Every great warrior, whether that's real or fictional, had a season where they didn't look powerful, where they didn't look confident, and where from the outside they looked like they were losing. And those hard times, they could do and they can do one of two things for us. They could either build us or they can break us down. And in the hero's case, when they go through a hard time, they use it and they let it build them to get to where they are. The difference is never the hardship, it's the decision that they made inside of what was going on. And we're the same way. And that's where most of us are right now. We're not behind. We're not failing. We're just standing in the part of the story that forges the hero. We just aren't there yet. So this struggle and this waiting and this overthinking is not new. People have wrestled with it for forever, for a very long time. And there's a scripture that always stops me every time I read it, and it comes from the Book of Mormon in the Book of Alma. And a little context because it really matters to me. Alma isn't speaking to the people who have already figured everything out. He's speaking to the people who want faith but don't feel confident yet. People who are trying to believe but just feel uncertain. And this is just a little piece of one of the verses, and it says, "Awake and arouse your faculties, even to an experiment upon my words, and exercise a particle of faith." So now, every time I hear that, it stops me, because the phrase exercise a particle of faith really matters to me. And so does the word experiment. Most people think faith means believing. And belief is a big part of faith. But belief without action isn't faith, it's a dream. Faith requires belief and movement. An experiment assumes imperfection. It assumes trial. It assumes adjustment. Alma wasn't talking and wasn't asking the people to know everything already. He was asking them to try. Faith was never about certainty. It was about acting before you had it all figured out. And then there's another verse, and this one comes from the Bible, and it's in the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is known for its brutal honesty. It talks a lot about time, uncertainty, and the limits of human control. And it's written for people who overthink life and who want guarantees before they act. And here's what it says. "Whoever watches the wind will not plant, and whoever looks at the clouds will not reap." I think about overthinkers when I hear that. People waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect timing, the perfect sign. Waiting feels wise, especially when we're associating it with faith. Because we hear about the heroes in Scripture who had to wait for weeks or months or even years. But what people miss is in those time frames that they were waiting, they were still acting in faith and they were still doing the things that they were told they needed to do. They were planting and they were moving. They were obeying without any guarantees. They were just acting in faith. God doesn't need perfect conditions from us. He needs us to be willing to move in the imperfect. I'm going to say that again. God does not need perfect conditions from us. He needs us to be willing to move in the imperfect. Watching and waiting doesn't protect your faith. Action is what actually builds it. When I think about the first rep, I don't think about something super impressive. I think about the thing we usually don't want to do because it's scary, or maybe it feels small, or because it doesn't look like much from the outside. But the first rep should actually be a relief, because once it's done, you're no longer stuck and you're in motion. Take the gym, for example. How many times do you want to do you want to be done with a workout because you know it's going to be good for you, but you don't want to go to the gym because you don't want to take that first rep? Or you don't want to go outside and you don't want to go on a run because you don't want to take those first steps. But as soon as you get on the bench and you do your first rep on the bench press, you feel good and you feel like you're ready to go. And same thing if you go outside and you're wanting to go on a run or even a walk. You maybe don't want to go on a walk because you feel like you can't run. And then from that point, it's like, well, if I can't go on a run, then I'm not going to go on a walk because what's the point? But the point is getting into that state mentally that you feel comfortable and confident in your own abilities. Not everyone can go out and run 4 miles without taking a break. And most people can't even go out and run a mile. And that's totally fine. It's taking that first step. It's putting your shoes on, getting outside, and literally taking that first step. Because once you're in motion, the momentum starts to build. And then from there, your path is going to become clearer. And you're going to understand why you're doing what you're doing, even if in the moment it doesn't feel great. A lot of the times, especially for me, if I'm outside running and I hit mile 1 or 2, I'm wondering why in the heck I decided to even go outside and run because I feel miserable in the moment. But as soon as I'm done, I feel great and I'm super happy that I did it. And it can almost become an addiction if you treat it as a positive thing. So most people don't overcomplicate life. They overcomplicate the first step to a happier one. And a lot of the time, that first step isn't even a physical step. It's a mental step. It's a shift from why is this happening to me to how lucky am I to have this opportunity. That shift alone counts as the first rep. If you feel like you're supposed to go outside and go on a walk and you're having a feeling of why do I need to go outside and go on a walk? We need to take a shift from that to how lucky am I that I have this opportunity to go outside and go on a walk. Real quick example. When I was going through my rehab for one of my knee surgeries, I was really struggling because I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. I felt like I should be running when I was still walking. My muscles weren't building like they were supposed to, and I just felt behind. And there was one day that I went into therapy, and I really just felt like I was done. I couldn't do it anymore. I had hit my mental breaking point in a sense. And I got in there, and I was doing my stretches and workouts on a table. And there was a man next to me that had a walker, and he was sitting there. He was laughing. He was joking. He was messing around with everybody. He was talking to me. And from my perspective, it looked like he was in the middle of a knee replacement. It looked like he had done 2 knee replacements. And he was happy. He was happy with where he was. And so I asked him, I said, how far into recovery are you? And he said, I'm 6 months. I was 6 months. I had surgery 6 months ago. And I was like, oh, so is it just total knee or what? And he goes, well, what did you do? I was like, well, I had a ACL reconstruction, so I had to get ACL surgery. And he was like, okay, so how are you doing? And he kind of flipped it on me. And so I was like, well, honestly, I'm struggling. I feel like I should be farther ahead. I'm not where I want to be. This isn't working out, and this isn't working out. But it's fine. We'll get there. And then I flipped it back to him, and I said, so what did you have done? Was it total knee or something else? And he said, I was at the sand dunes with my family, and me and my brother and my cousin and my 2 boys decided to have a race down one of the dunes. And So he said they all lined up at the top. They were getting ready to go, and on 3, they all started sprinting. And they were all running down. And about halfway down the hill, somebody had dug a big hole. And as he was running, if he was running like this and the hole was right here, he ran down and both legs went right down into that hole. And your knees are supposed to bend like this, and it snapped his legs the other way. And he said that they immediately had to call in life flight, and they got him into the hospital. And the first thing the doctor said when they got to the hospital was, we're going to need to amputate both of his legs or else he's not going to survive. And him, the man himself, and his wife made the decision not to amputate and go into and have this major surgery done. And after the surgery was over, they said, okay, we were able to reconnect everything, rebuild everything, but you're never going to be able to walk again. You're probably going to be basically paralyzed from the waist down. And as I'm sitting here listening to this story, I just can't even imagine what he was going through, what emotions were going through his head, and his wife and his kids. Like, I couldn't even imagine being told I'm never going to be able to walk again. But the thing that stood out to me the most was that this man looked at that doctor and said, you're wrong. I will be walking again, and I will be walking within a year. So after he told me this story, he kind of looked at me and said, I'm not telling you this to get attention, and I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad for me. I'm telling you this because no matter what anybody says, if you put your mind to something, you can do it. He's like, I didn't even have feeling in my legs for 3.5 months to 4 months after my surgery. And there was a lot of nights where I really thought I was never going to walk again. And then he looked at me and he said, I just want you to know that anything is possible, because today is the first day that I am leaving here in a walker and not a wheelchair. And that really hit home with me, because I was in my own little pity party of, why is this happening to me? Why isn't this working? Why isn't this working? And I'm sitting next to a man who, from the outside, I thought he had just a knee construction done, which that's still big, but he was told he was never going to walk again. And the first reaction to the doctor after he was told that was, you're wrong. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it in this time frame. And it really stood out to me, because why in the heck am I sitting here feeling bad for myself when I had this little thing done that I've already done before, and it's something that I know can be done, and he had no idea if it was going to work. But he had a completely different mind shift. Every time he explained something, it was, I'm so lucky that I have this, or I'm so lucky that my wife was there to help me with this decision, or I'm so lucky that I have the trainers that I do that have helped me along this journey. And that has really stood out to me for a long time now. Of, I take and have been taking a lot for granted in my life, and I always felt like the world was against me. And since I have made that mind shift from, why is this happening to me, why me, to how lucky am I to have this opportunity, it's been a complete game changer. I get excited to be able to go outside and walk, and even though there's days that I don't necessarily want to go to work, I get excited because I have the opportunity to work, and I have the opportunity to have 2 paying jobs so that my wife can help me focus on the business. And how lucky am I that I have a wife that's willing to put in the work and time and effort to do the things that I have set my mind to, and she's helping me along this journey. It's something super small, but it can make all the difference. So if you did something as small as drinking an extra glass of water today because you felt like you needed to and it was good for your body, that counts as the first step. That counts as the first rep. That's action, And that's obedience, and that's understanding that even though it's not big, it's going to help. And here's what happens when you make the first move. You realize it wasn't as scary as you thought. Clarity shows up. You start seeing a path. Momentum starts to shift. Confidence begins to build. Not because everything changed, but because you did. The circumstances were the same either way. The problem is, right after conviction, people postpone the action they know they should take, and they tell themselves that they'll do it later. But doing it later turns into forgetting about it, or turns into overthinking, and then they change their mind. And that's how you kill that momentum. So, here's my challenge for you. You don't need to change your whole life today. You just need to believe that you can make a change, and then prove that change with one small action. One rep, one shift, one step, one glass of water. Just get out and move, even if it feels unimpressive. And especially if it feels unimpressive, that's okay. Get out there and take that first step. Because the world doesn't need the perfect you. It needs the real you still fighting every day.